Now I leave the floor to the colleague from the Open University of Japan, Professor Kumiko Aoki, and to Professor Yeon, sorry for the pronunciation of the name, from Saokmyung Women's University, South Korea, and Professor Christian Andreas Schumann from University of Applied Science of Zwickau, Germany. Please, Professor Aoki.
Thank you, Laura. My name is Kumiko Aoki. I'm from the Open University of Japan, and I was asked to introduce and give some overview of the chapter 3, which is titled System and Technology. And there are 5 articles in the chapter. Here it shows the 5 sections. The first one, the technological evolution and its impact on the learning process, by Professor Monia Abig and Professor Rachida Ejon. I hope I pronounced correctly, from Morocco. And the second one, systems and technology, which actually will be discussed further by Professor Yeon Tae-sung and Yong-in Sung. And the third one is a new TV practice in distance education in Turkey by Professor Ufuk Kushakan. I hope I pronounced correctly, from another university in Turkey. The fourth one is organizational and design aspects of innovative e-learning systems by digital television by Professor Nunzio Castellino here at Italy, Roman University, Università degli Studi Gregoriano Marconi. And the last one is written by myself, Technological Affordances in Distance Education. So since I was given to give some, was asked to give some overview of the entire chapter, I try my best to do that. And interestingly, although we didn't really discuss in the beginning what we should talk about and what we cover in this whole chapter, but by reading all the manuscript and the papers for this chapter, I identified common themes, interestingly, and the authors in this chapter recognized and mentioned these common themes more or less. And so I like to talk about the common themes I identified throughout the manuscript in the chapter. The first one is technological evolution of distance education learning. So there's a process of evolving technological means of distance education. And a few of the authors mentioned. There's also the theme of relationship between technology and pedagogy. In the previous presentations, they were mentioning the pedagogical change. We have to realize, we have to actually think about the change in pedagogy in relation to technological evolution. So that is also the major theme in this chapter. And also technology for lifelong learning. We now have to not only think of higher education in terms of just college age, but we have to think of education throughout our lives. So that the technology actually can become very useful to help the lifelong learning. And some authors also mentioned that what is the future? What is the future of learning? Like previous presenters also mentioned what would be the future of learning. And the future of learning pretty much depends on how we use technology as well. So I will just discuss one by one in terms of common themes, what I could identify among those manuscripts in a chapter. The first one, the technological evolution, some authors identified the several stages we went through in terms of technology of distance education. The first generation of distance education, as you know, is the before any ICT age, so it's pretty much correspondence education. the instruction delivered by mail and correspondence through mail. The second generation of distance education is actually the start of the Open University by UK, which actually, not really this is the main mode of instruction, but it popularized that distance education through broadcasting. Actually, many universities, including mine, many open universities in the world, including my open university, still use broadcasting as a major mode of instruction delivery. There are also good and bads in doing so, but we were kind of lucky to have that, the broadcasting stations to be able to air our instruction over the TV and radio. And the third generation of distance education, as you know, is delivered by computers and the internet. And many people actually end here. We are in the third generation of distance education. But I think we are actually now in the fourth generation of distance education, as we are not only using computers and the internet for presenting content, but we are using those Web 2.0, those tools on the internet to create learning communities, which is, I think, should be distinguished from the third generation of distance education, which pretty much by using computers and internet for presenting content. And many authors also mentioned about mode of learning, and I think that would be discussed more in depth by Professor Yoon in next presentation. Of course, e-learning. Many people use the term e-learning slightly different way. There is no universal, I think, definition of e-learning, and when people say e-learning, they may mean slightly different things, but it's okay. E-learning is e-learning, the learning by use of, I think, ICT. M-learning is also a term nowadays the popularly used. M stands for mobile learning, and so it's the learning through mobile technologies, I think, which is a subset of e-learning in my understanding. And the third, U-learning, and some people mention that as P-learning, I think meaning the same thing. U-learning meaning ubiquitous learning, the learning everywhere, because nowadays devices are becoming portable and mobile. You can actually learn anywhere you want, and which is the same as pervasive learning, P-learning, which is everywhere. And the characteristics of U-learning is community, autonomy, and location. And the interesting thing I noted, the mention by the Korean author Sung Yoon, is that it's blurring the boundaries between online and offline. We don't really care if it's online learning or offline learning, because sometimes it may be offline, because when you are in a subway and underground, you may not be able to have connection, but you are still using the same device. So online, offline doesn't really matter sometimes. And also, there are 3 chapters which mention, 3 actually papers in the chapter mention T-learning, which was often overlooked in the discussion of e-learning. But T stands for television. I think it's a very important part of learning experiences as well. And although nowadays television is only for those people who got licenses from the government to be able to broadcast over the air, but in the future, T-learning will become more ubiquitous, and many institutions will be able to do T-learning via not only just broadcasting, but also like IPTV and so forth. So T-learning is, well, in future, the T-learning, e-learning will converge, and it doesn't really matter if it's on TV or if it's on the computer. But so far, we have distinct differences in terms of T-learning and e-learning. And so far, T-learning is good for mass education because many more people have TV set than computers in the world, and more so for internet connection. So if you want to educate people, mass people in a country, especially in developing countries, those rural areas where internet connection will be difficult, T-learning is more ideal to reach. And also, television set is familiar to many people, not only for the student, but also those senior citizens and also young kids. So it's a really good tool for lifelong learning. And nowadays with digital TV, although the features are not really being used as much as expected, but TV can become, to some extent, interactive. And so with the limited interactivity, it still can offer very, very rich video, very rich audio experience to the viewers. And so in a sense, with interactivity TV, we can offer simulated or limited interactivity. And in the future, I hope it will come soon, with the next generation of T-learning, we can have personalized TV. Not only just the broadcasting, but also TV broadcasting over IP or mobile TV. In Japan, many people with mobile devices actually watch TV called one segment, one seg, TV broadcasting. And they watch TV on their cell phone devices. And also video on demand. People don't have to confine to a certain time and place to be able to watch certain programs. They can watch anytime they want. So I think in the near future, the T-learning and e-learning will converge and integrate, and there won't be much of the distinction between the two. Another issue, the themes many authors identified are standardization issues. When we talk about technology, it always becomes the difficulty and hindrance for some people if the technologies are not standardized. So technological standardization is important for interoperability. Interoperability in terms of basic architecture, such as learning management systems, interoperability of learning object metadata, or shareable content object reference model, and interoperability for learning processes. This is kind of new, but the learning design standardization, IMSLD, is very technical standardization, but the aim is to share the learning activities and learning designs among teachers. And also interoperability of learner profile. There are a couple of standardization for this learner profile interoperability. So these are technical issues, but also affect the learning environment. And also relationship between technology and pedagogy. And when we talk about pedagogy, I think we discussed the evolution of technology, and we can also think of evolution of pedagogy. We started with behaviorist, pretty much behaviorist model of distance education, to cognitivist model, to constructivist model, and nowadays social constructivist model. And so I try to actually match that the thinking of pedagogy, the model of pedagogy, to the generation of distance education. I think first generation of distance education is pretty much behaviorist model. The education is to transmit knowledge, to change people's attitude or behavior. That's pretty much behaviorist model of distance of education. And the second generation of distance education, I would say, pretty much cognitivist model. The importance is the effective presentation of information. that's how you can actually effectively process the information in your head. That would be the main theme of the pedagogy, cognitivist pedagogy, and that will be applied to second generation of distance education. And in the third generation of distance education, the learning become more constructivist. Authentic learning become important aspect. And when it comes to the fourth generation of distance education, socio-constructivist thinking of pedagogy, the model of pedagogy, which means we actually construct knowledge by interacting with people, not only from our own head, but also by interacting with the peers and the learners on the content you are trying to learn. And also there are, so I said that socio-constructivist model is kind of fourth generation, correspond to fourth generation of distance education. There are a few new pedagogies which I would say go beyond the socio-constructivist model of pedagogy, was identified by Terry Anderson in Athabasca University, and I pretty much agree with him. The first one he identifies the pedagogy of nearness. What it means is that to re-examine the online experiences and applying those online experiences into physical actions. So not only end in online, the virtual experiences, but you also apply what you learn online in the physical, your actual near, physically near environment. And this is also very popular nowadays. George Seaman, now also with Athabasca University in Canada, he proposed the Connectivism model of pedagogy. In Connectivism model of pedagogy, the learning is a process of encoding nodes of information and knowledge and connecting them to other nodes. So it's a very abstract the thinking, but if you think of Web 2.0 and beyond, what we do is not really the only processing information in our head, but we are interpreting information, and in way of interpreting information, we try to connect what we interpret to people by articulating that interpretation, so connecting to other nodes. And the last one Anderson identified was heutagogy, which is an educational approach where the learner decides what and how learning should take place. You know, so far, education is pretty much teacher-centered. Well, or I would say university or institution-centered. The student have to really follow what university decide, and also the teacher and the academics decide. But in the future, I don't know how far-fetched the future is, but maybe the student, the learner will decide on their own what they learn, which contents to learn, how they're going to be assessed. Oh, too close, too close. Sorry if it's annoying, it was too close. And how learning should take place. So everything is in the hands of learners, not only, well, the teacher will become just the guide or the mentor for student to decide. And also the learning will become multi-channel. And when I say multi-channel, you may think channel in terms of sensory channel, but I don't really mean sensory channel, but here the channel meaning the different channels of communication. Nowadays, there are so many different ways of learning. Desktop computing, laptop computing, notebook computing, computers, mobile phones, personal digital assistant, tablet PCs, smartphones, e-books, and IPTV, etc. And it doesn't really matter what device we use. Device is just a tool. What we matter is with how learners learn. And we also have those social media, like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Second Life, and so forth, which means we can provide multiple channels for learners to form learning communities, for participating and constructing knowledge. And some other people also mentioned that there are blurring boundaries among formal, informal, and non-formal education. And the student, the learner, may decide in the end, in the future, which one to be assessed. So it doesn't matter if it's offered by school or they learn from the book or from an apprenticeship. There are many different forms of learning, and the formal and informal and non-formal learning, the boundary will become blurred in the future. So, what will be the future of education? Should not confine learners to the ways of learning the institution decides or teachers decide. And I think the role of educators should assist a learner in setting goals and also creating the most effective learning path in achieving those goals, with multiple channels of content, multiple channels of communication, and multiple channels of assessment. And what we can do is we can minimize noises the learner will encounter while retaining some serendipity. It's difficult because if we actually organize the learning environment too rigid, we'll actually deprive serendipity from learners. So we have to give some kind of serendipity in learning, but at the same time, we should minimize the noise. Noises are unnecessary engagement for students. And lastly, I like to mention there are some cultural perspectives we have to consider in designing learning environment as well. And I was educated both in Japan and US, and also taught first in US and also now in Japan. I see lots of differences in culture, in terms of learning and educational culture, and we cannot just ignore those cultural differences. And so it's easy to discuss, let's say, constructivism, in Western countries, or in Western countries, Eastern countries. We oftentimes discuss constructivism, but it's difficult to actually practice and make it a systematic way to implement those constructivism. But we have to make one step at a time to actualize ideas into practices. Well, thank you very much. That's the end of my discussion.